Before the money, before the empire, there was a small town in Arkansas where life offered few ways out. Years later, that same place became the pipeline for a rapidly expanding operation. Teenagers were recruited, transported, and put to work running houses around the clock, earning more money in a week than many adults made in a month. It sounded like opportunity at first, but the reality was far more controlled, far more dangerous, and far more calculated. What started with a few recruits quickly turned into a system powered by young workers, and it helped fuel one of the fastest growing operations in the city. This story kicks off in 1950, down in Marianna, Arkansas, a small town where life was already stacked against you before you even took your first step. That's where Larry Marlowe Chambers was born to Curtis and Hazel Chambers. He wasn't the first child, though. He came in third, right behind Curtis Jr. and Willie Lee, but that household didn't stay small for long, not even close. After Larry came Danny, then years later, in 1962, the twins Billy Joe, known as BJ, and Joe showed up, and finally Otis Bernard. Altogether, Curtis and Hazel ended up raising 16 children. Yeah, 16, a whole army under one roof. And that roof, it wasn't much. The family lived in a worn-down trailer sitting on 44 acres of land. Marianna itself already had a reputation. Deep poverty, limited opportunities, and a long, heavy history tied to race. Back then, it was a majority black town dealing with some of the harshest economic conditions in the country. Jobs were scarce, money was even scarcer, and the system wasn't built for people like them to win. Growing up there wasn't just about being broke. It was about figuring out how to survive every single day. The Chambers kids came up during the Jim Crow era, dealing with quiet but constant racism. It wasn't always loud, but it was always there. Some nights got so rough that the kids would stand outside white neighbors' homes, just hoping somebody would hand them leftovers after dinner. Getting out of Marianna, that wasn't something people did easily. The doors to better jobs and better lives were locked tight, especially for black families. Still, in 1967, Curtis and Hazel managed to carve out something of their own. Right there on their land, they opened a bar and restaurant called the Tin Top Inn. That spot became the heart of the family's world, especially for the boys who spent most of their time there. But while the family was trying to build something, Larry was already drifting in a different direction. By December 1969, just 2 days before Christmas, things took a turn. Larry, who had been living up in St. Louis with his brother Danny and their grandparents, came back to Marianna for the holidays. Instead of laying low, he linked up with an old friend, and the two of them decided to steal a couple of cars just to ride around. It didn't last long. He got caught on the spot and locked up for auto theft. Now Larry wasn't built to sit still. On New Year's Eve, while a guard stepped into his cell to fix a broken toilet, Larry saw his moment. He overpowered the man and slipped right out. Just like that, he spent the rest of that year hiding out in a church, but that setting didn't slow him down. The very next day, New Year's Day, he stole the pastor's car and went straight back to the streets, launching into a 2-day robbery spree. Then things escalated. Out in Ouachita County, a state trooper pulled him over. Routine stop, nothing special. But as the officer approached the car, Larry pulled a gun and shot him, then ran off into the woods. By the next morning, police had tracked him down. That moment landed him a charge of assault with intent to kill and a 9-year sentence. But even prison couldn't hold him. 5 months in, Larry pulled off his first escape and made it all the way to Phoenix, Arizona before getting caught. Later on, while working on a chain gang, he bribed a guard and disappeared again. Every time he got loose, it was the same story. More robberies, more stolen cars, more running. At one point, he drove a stolen vehicle all the way to Pittsburgh. Eventually, it all caught up to him in Wynne, Arkansas, right in the middle of trying to rob a jewelry store. That's how his run ended, at least for that chapter. And just like that, the Chambers name started getting tied to chaos. After serving 6 years, Larry got back out, but he didn't change direction. Instead, he linked up with his brother Danny and a friend named James Cooper. The plan this time was to rob a post office in Helena, Arkansas. It went bad fast. All three got arrested and pressure started building immediately. Danny and James had their fingerprints at the scene and they folded quick, confessing to everything. Larry stayed quiet, knowing he was already on parole and couldn't afford another hit, but the system had its own play. Since Danny and James didn't have prior records, the sheriff's office offered them a deal, light sentences in exchange for testifying against Larry. The family brought in a lawyer, Mike Etalk, to defend the brothers. But things got complicated when Etalk was also assigned to represent James, who couldn't afford his own lawyer. Now, the same man was representing all sides of a case that was already falling apart. When Larry realized the others were taking deals and pointing fingers, he saw the writing on the wall. Backed into a corner, he pleaded guilty to burglary and theft along with them. Even then, sitting in jail waiting for everything to process, he couldn't stay put. Larry managed to escape from that local lockup 3 different times. 3. Eventually, the system caught up again and he was handed a 3-year sentence, but Larry wasn't done fighting. From behind bars, he wrote out his own appeal, by hand. No law degree, no formal training, just pure determination. And somehow, it worked. In 1977, the Arkansas State Supreme Court reviewed his case and overturned the conviction completely. Now, after finishing up at Lehigh in '72, Willie Lee Chambers did what a lot of young men were trying to do back then, find a way out and make something of himself. He spent 2 years in the U.S. Army. Then by 1974, he made a move that would change everything. He packed up and headed to Detroit, following his brother Danny, who had already planted roots there. Once Willie touched down in the city, he kept things straight, landing a steady job as a mail carrier with the Postal Service. Now BJ, Billy Joe, his path looked a little different from the jump. He was smaller in stature, about 5 feet 5 inches, but what he lacked in size, he made up for in hustle. In 1978, not long after his parents split, he followed his brothers up to Detroit too. He was still in high school at the time, so he finished out his education at Kettering High. To make ends meet, he picked up a job cleaning up at Easttown Shoes after school. But real talk, that kind of money wasn't stretching far. Not in a city like Detroit. Through Danny, BJ got introduced to a man named L.C. Big Terry Colbert, another Arkansas native who had already figured out how to play both sides. By day, Big Terry worked at an auto plant in Dearborn. By night, he was moving marijuana to boost his income. When he eventually lost that factory job, he didn't fold. He leveled up. He opened a convenience store called the T&T, and that's where BJ stepped in, learning the game and starting to move product himself. While Willie was keeping things clean and BJ was easing into the streets, Larry was on a whole different trajectory, and it was getting darker by the year. In 1978, he got caught holding weapons, stolen from a gun store back in Marianna, and got sent right back to prison. He didn't stay locked up long, though. A year later, he was back out, and instead of slowing down, he went harder. Larry launched into what can only be described as a full-blown robbery run, later claiming he hit over 100 jewelry stores across Arkansas. And he wasn't sloppy with it either. He had a system. He'd wait until the shops closed, climb up on the roof, drill straight through the ceiling and drop in. No rush, no noise, just him and a whole night to clear everything out. By 1980, back in Detroit, BJ's life was shifting in a different way. His girlfriend, niece, had just given birth to their son, Billy Jr. That moment pushed him to go all in. He dropped out of school, left his janitor job behind, and committed fully to the drug trade. A year later, they had a daughter, And by then, BJ was deep in it. He wasn't just hustling blindly either. He moved smart. His apartment sat close to Grosse Pointe, a wealthy, mostly white area just outside Detroit. That location gave him access to suburban customers with money, but his real market stayed local. Young people in the city who kept the flow steady. On a regular day, he was bringing in anywhere from $200 to $400 just off marijuana. When crack cocaine first hit the streets, BJ didn't jump at it right away. He was making good money already and didn't see the need to switch things up. But then somebody broke it down for him, really broke it down. The profits, the demand, the addictive nature of it. Once he understood the numbers, that hesitation disappeared. He pivoted and everything changed. Around that same time, Larry was back making moves too. In 1981, he and another parolee stole a money order machine from a post office and started selling the money orders themselves. It was bold, almost unreal, but that's how he operated. A month later, he headed to Detroit to reconnect with Willie and BJ, but it didn't last. He set up a deal at a motel in Highland Park, trying to move those stolen money orders. What he didn't know was that his partner had already flipped. The whole thing was a setup, and Larry walked straight into a sting run by an undercover postal inspector. That move landed him a 4-year federal sentence, and this time he got sent to USP Leavenworth. But even behind those walls, Larry wasn't sitting idle. He treated prison like a business hub, running gambling operations, setting up extortion plays, and stacking money from inside. By the time he was done, he had made around $50,000, all while locked up. There was a reason he moved like that too. At some point during his time in the system, a prison psychiatrist tested his IQ. Larry scored a 140, near genius level. The intelligence was never the issue. It was how he chose to use it. Back in Detroit, BJ was building something serious. By 1982, he and Willie opened up Willie's retail store on Courchevel and St. Clair. Willie had also saved enough from his postal job to start a car wash next door. On the surface, it looked like they were building legitimate businesses. Behind the scenes, though, it was something else entirely. With Big Terry supplying them, BJ was moving marijuana and heroin right out of those storefronts, and it didn't stop there. By early 1983, Willie opened another convenience store on the Lower East Side, bringing BJ in again. Naturally, BJ turned it into another base of operations. When police raided the shop, now called BJ's Party Store, he adjusted quickly. Instead of relying on one visible location, he started buying up cheap houses and spreading the operation across multiple spots. Low profile, harder to track. At that point, it wasn't just BJ anymore. It was a whole network. His brothers, Willie, Danny, Joe, and David were all involved. His close friend, Jerry J. Man Gant, was in the mix. The Colbert connection stayed strong, with both Big Terry's brother and son playing roles. BJ even brought in people from back home, including Niece's brothers, Boogaloo Driscoll and P-Boy Coleman. Then, 1984 hit, and that's when everything escalated. Crack cocaine entered the picture fully, and the money went crazy. What used to bring in steady cash now exploded into something much bigger. Big Terry alone jumped from making $1,000 a week to over $3,000. The Chambers operation wasn't small time anymore. They were running the Lower East Side, but that kind of spotlight brings heat. By August, BJ was already drawing attention, getting arrested after a physical altercation with 2 Detroit police officers during a traffic stop right outside his house. Then, on September 1st, an undercover cop managed to buy crack from one of their spots on Gray Street. That was all law enforcement needed. 2 days later, on Labor Day, police raided the house. BJ, Danny, their cousin Frog, and another associate were all arrested. Officers seized 2,000 packages of crack. A week later, they came back again, applying even more pressure. At that point, BJ knew Detroit was getting too hot. He pulled back, heading down to Marianna and laying low for nearly a year while others kept things running. But distance came with the cost. By 1985, the operation was slipping. So BJ came back with a different mindset, cut the weak links and rebuild stronger. He fired almost everyone who wasn't family, including some of his closest associates. Then he rebuilt from scratch, bringing in new faces like Tony the Tiger Alexander, Eric Fats Wilkins, and a major player from back home, Cadillac Mario. Mario turned out to be key. He started recruiting young guys from Arkansas, bringing them up to Detroit to run day-to-day operations. These were the boots on the ground, holding things together. And it worked. The operation didn't just recover, it exploded, growing from a handful of houses to around 50 crack spots across the city. Then Larry came home. He got out of prison in April 1985 and wasted no time getting back in position. By July, he had formed something called the Wrecking Crew, a group designed to enforce discipline and protect the operation. But they weren't just for show, they were known for being brutal. At one point, they caught an employee scamming customers by selling fake product. The punishment wasn't just getting fired, it turned into a violent beating using whatever was around, sending a message nobody in the crew would forget. That was Larry's lane, control through fear. BJ, on the other hand, ran things differently. He liked to enjoy the money and made sure his people did too. Trips, amusement parks, out-of-town getaways, he built loyalty through lifestyle. Still, Larry had his own layers. While all this was going on, he enrolled at Wayne State University, studying music history and Spanish. Same guy running enforcement was also sitting in classrooms trying to expand his mind. At the same time, he started a relationship with a young woman named Belinda Lumpkin and moved her into the house he shared with his brother David. As the business kept growing, one major problem started showing: supply. Their main source, Big Terry, couldn't keep up with the demand anymore. So BJ and Larry made a power move. Instead of relying on a middleman, they went straight to the source. Through a connection, they linked up directly with the suppliers behind the scenes, two major players named Sam Doc Curry and Art A.D. Derrick. By March of 1986, the Chambers brothers were done playing small. They made a bold move, dropped $75,000 on a 4-story red brick apartment building called the Broadmore, sitting at 1350 East Grand Boulevard. But this wasn't no regular real estate play. This right here became the heart of their entire operation, and Larry was the one running point. Now, the Broadmoor didn't function like any normal apartment complex. Those 52 units, they weren't being rented out the usual way. Tenants were either paid to leave or pushed out altogether. In their place came drug labs, stash rooms, and sales spots. The whole building got flipped into a machine. Larry even added his own touch, set up a bar and grill on the first floor, and brought in Patricia Middleton to manage things, keep the books tight, and run the kitchen. Step inside, and it didn't feel like chaos. It felt organized, too organized. The first floor had a bar and even a pawn shop vibe going, but that was just the front. From there, people got directed exactly where they needed to go. Second floor was the lounge, somewhere customers could sit, relax, and use what they just bought. Third and fourth floors, that was where the real money moved. Cocaine sales, nonstop traffic, and women working the building. They even ran promotions, weekend deals, free tequila shots with purchases, anything to keep customers coming back. And it worked. At its peak, that one building alone was pulling in around $100,000 a day. Meanwhile, the youngest brother, Otis, was still just a kid in high school, but every summer he was right there in Detroit, learning the ropes and getting involved. What made it wild was how structured everything was. This wasn't sloppy street dealing. This was run like a corporation. They had promotions like buy one, get one deals. They handed out discount coupons. They even tested their own operation by sending in people undercover to buy from their own spots, just to check if workers were doing things right. And the workforce? Massive. A lot of them were teenagers brought in straight from Marianna. These kids were given photo ID cards like they were working a regular job. Pay was about $100 a day, but there was a catch. You had to be available all the time. No clocking out. Some of them started skipping school completely, pulling long shifts inside houses that were locked from the outside, windows barred shut. Inside those houses, rules were everything, and to keep things running, they built a full pipeline of workers, over 150 people, most of them young, handling everything from street sales to security to cooking product, and all that structure paid off. The operation was pulling in around $55 million a year. They got a name in the streets, the Cash Money Brothers. At their peak, this wasn't just a crew anymore, this was an empire. They had around 500 people working under them, controlled close to 200 crack houses across Detroit, supplied another 500 spots on top of that. From 1983 to 1988, they were averaging over $40 million a year in profit, and they weren't planning to stop in Detroit. They had their eyes on expanding into places like Flint and Toledo. With that kind of money, the lifestyle changed fast. They bought luxury properties out in Jamaica, started filming themselves, capturing the money, the houses, the lifestyle, stacks of cash piled up like it meant nothing. Gold fixtures in bathrooms. It was all being documented like they knew people wouldn't believe it otherwise. Larry even joked about giving the money away, knowing full well that wasn't happening. But while all that was going on, life still hit hard. In early 1986, Joe Chambers had just gotten out of prison. Less than 2 months later, he died in a car accident after a train hit his vehicle back in Arkansas. The whole organization showed up for his funeral. Not long after, when Otis graduated high school, the brothers made sure their presence was felt, pulling up in multiple limousines, showing everybody they were still on top. But behind the scenes, the pressure was building. That same year, the DEA stepped in heavy, launching a crackdown operation aimed at slowing the spread of crack. Tips started pouring in, and it didn't take long before attention landed on the Chambers operation. By August, things started cracking. Patricia Middleton flipped and began feeding information to the feds. Raids followed, multiple properties hit at the same time. Then more trouble came when little Terry Colbert started talking too, leading police straight to key locations. During one of those raids, officers found a written list of rules, the so-called commandments that laid out exactly how the operation was run. Still, even with the heat rising, the money kept flowing. Larry even took his inner circle out to Jamaica for a luxury cruise to celebrate, but that momentum didn't last. In April 1987, Otis got pulled over in Arkansas after running a stop sign. What seemed small turned serious fast. Police searched the car and found nearly $60,000 in cash stuffed inside. The story didn't hold up and the money was seized. Then the media stepped in. By September 1987, a local Detroit station aired a full report exposing the operation. Footage from police raids showed members counting stacks of cash, bragging about their wealth, treating it like it would never end. But it was already unraveling. That same month, David Chambers died from illness, marking the beginning of a heavy downturn for the family. By December, the case was ready. Federal indictments dropped and arrests started rolling in. Larry was picked up first, found hiding in an apartment. Police recovered drugs and weapons on the spot, and he was denied bail immediately. BJ held out a little longer, but by January 1988, he was caught too, found with cocaine and a firearm inside his home. By February, it was over. After 18 months of quietly building their case, law enforcement finally made their move. When they swept in, the entire operation unraveled fast. By the time it was over, authorities had seized hundreds of weapons, dozens of vehicles, large quantities of cocaine, and more than $1 million in cash and jewelry. Just like that, the empire that once looked untouchable started to crumble. This wasn't a sudden breakthrough either. Investigators had been putting the puzzle together piece by piece, tracking movements, following the money, and connecting the dots. And now, after all that time, they were finally ready to bring everything down at once. A 15-count indictment got unsealed, and it wasn't small. 22 members of the Chambers organization got named. Not just the little guys either, the whole core was in there. Larry and BJ at the top, Willie Lee, Otis, and the rest of the inner circle. Even people who had already been locked up for years were still tied into it. And the charges? Heavy. This wasn't just street-level stuff anymore. The government came with everything, running a full criminal enterprise, conspiracy, drug distribution, firearms tied to drug activity, and tax evasion on top of it. Because no matter how big the operation gets, the government always circles back to the money. When it came time for court, the case was led by U.S. Attorney Roy C. Hayes out of Michigan. But even before things officially kicked off, the crew was already starting to crack. Some had taken plea deals, others had disappeared completely, still on the run. Most of them faced a jury, but Willie Lee took a different path and put his fate in the hands of a judge instead. Once the trial got going, the courtroom turned into a place where everything came out, and some of it hit hard. One of the key voices was a 19-year-old woman named Felicia Gilchrist. She took the stand after being granted immunity, and what she described painted a clear picture of how deep things really went. She talked about working nonstop shifts, selling through a hole in the wall, barely sleeping, just moving product all day and night. It got even heavier when she mentioned her younger sister, only 14, working those same shifts with her. At one point, she even brought her newborn baby into that same environment just days after giving birth. That alone told the jury what kind of operation this really was. Then came little Terry Colbert. His testimony brought violence right into the room. He described a situation where things went left after a disagreement, and it ended with him being beaten and shot. He only survived because he managed to escape and get himself to a hospital. After that, his time in the game was done. Other witnesses started connecting dots, pointing fingers, laying out roles. Names that once moved quietly in the background were now front and center. But then came a moment nobody expected. Perry Coleman, who had agreed to cooperate with the government, stepped in ready to testify. He had already worked out a deal to reduce his own sentence. At first, he spoke against the organization, giving the prosecution exactly what they needed. Then everything flipped. The next day, he took it all back, said he was scared for himself, for his family. Just like that, his testimony collapsed. 2 cases tied to his statements got thrown out completely. It showed something real. The fear tied to that organization didn't disappear just because people were locked up. Even with that setback, the case kept moving forward. Later that year, more arrests followed, including one of their lieutenants out in California, which only added more weight to the conspiracy charges. A few people caught breaks, some charges got dropped, one person walked free, but for the main players, it was already done. By October 28th, the verdicts came in. All 4 Chambers brothers were convicted, along with several key members of the crew. The charges stuck: conspiracy, drug operations, everything the government had built. Then came sentencing, and the judge didn't hold back. Willie got 21 years and a heavy fine. Otis got 27 years, same kind of financial hit. BJ took a bigger fall, 45 years and a $500,000 fine. But Larry, that's where it hit hardest. life in prison, no way around it. The rest of the crew followed behind with long sentences too, decades across the board. Nobody at the Corps walked away clean. After that, the story shifted from the streets to prison walls. Years later, in 2006, BJ found a different way to tell his story. While still locked up, he wrote and published a book called Prodigy Hustler, putting his version of everything out into the world. Eventually, some doors started opening. Willie got released in 2007. BJ followed in 2010. Otis came home in 2011, but Larry never left. While others got a second shot, he remained behind bars, still serving that life sentence, his story frozen in place while the rest moved on.